Before starting this webinar, I want to take the opportunity to introduce to you our last publication on productive inclusion. The report, Linking Social Protection with Productive Inclusion, is based on the workshop which was organized by the GIZ Global Alliances for Social Protection program that took place in Mexico City in September 2015. So this document is built on valuable and vast experience from representatives of Chile, Indonesia, Mexico, Peru, and the Philippines, shared during our Global Practitioners Learning event. The report describes good practices in fostering multi-sectoral coordination, which is important in linking social protection to productive inclusion measures, and the innovative approach implemented by the 5 participant countries for their productive inclusion programs. SPEC has previously organized a webinar showcasing the good practices and innovative approach of the Sustainable Livelihood Program of the Philippines. The webinar today highlights the approach of Chile through its Inter-sectoral Social Protection System, with heavy emphasis on the accompaniment approach of its Familia program. 2 other webinars on the practices and innovation on linking social protection with productive inclusion programs of Mexico and Peru will also be organized this year. This report was prepared by GIZ and authored by my colleague February Amelia Kubri. You may also access this material through the platform of socialprotection.org. Now, let's start the webinar, and first, let's have a quick look on the agenda. At the beginning of the session, I will give a brief introduction on the topic of the webinar. After that, Mauricio Rios and Claudio Prim, representatives from the Chilean Fund for Solidarity and Social Investment, FOSIS, will present us the Chile's Inter-sectoral Social Protection System and its Familia program. By the way, let me introduce to you our speakers. Mauricio Rios has a master's degree in sociology and also has extensive experience in the implementation of public policies in the field of social development, empowerment, and participatory governance. He currently serves as an expert for methodology and training in FOSIS Familia program. Claudio Prim studied political science and economics and has a master's degree in international affairs and governance. He has 6 years of experience in the private and public sector and currently serves as a coordinator of FOSIS International Cooperation Office. After FOSIS intervention, we will invite Simone Cecchini to comment on the presentation, and I am delighted to take this opportunity to introduce to you our discussant. Simone Cecchini is an economist with the Social Development Division of the United Nations Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, based in Santiago de Chile. He works on poverty reduction and social protection policies and programs, advising countries of the region. He has edited a series of publications on social protection system for the region. After Simone's comment, there will be time to the questions you may have. And finally, we will have some minutes to close our webinar. Now, let's move on the introduction of this webinar. Since 2000, Chile has been developing an integrated and coordinated intersectoral social protection system for poor and vulnerable population. Its current social protection model is the result of a series of efforts, institutions, and policies that have been consolidated over time. This system understands poverty as a multidimensional phenomenon. Consequently, one of the landmarks of the Chilean social protection system is the creation of a program with a strong psychosocial component. Currently, this program is called Familia and is complemented by cash transfers to contribute to the general strategy of improving the quality of life of its beneficiaries. Also, it seeks to encourage households to develop their skills and capabilities for social inclusion and self-development. Furthermore, the family members receive an exclusive access to other social programs to achieve their specific goals. Let's get to know more about this innovative approach. So now I will invite Claudio and Mauricio to present Chile's Inter-sectoral Social Protection System and its Familia program. Due to our tight schedule, I'm going to ask you, Claudio and Mauricio, to try to keep the length of your presentation accordingly to the time program. Having said that, now we can start. Claudio and Mauricio, please, we are all eager to listen to your presentation.
Thank you very much, Cecilia. I will briefly walk you through the structure of this presentation, so I'll ask you to skip to the next slide, please. After a short introduction of FOSIS, we will speak about family accompaniment as a concept and why Chile chose this approach in its fight against poverty back in 2002. And then how this approach gave birth to what is now Chile's Inter-sectoral Social Protection System. Afterwards, Mauricio will speak about the Familia program and focus on its social labor accompaniment component and on a series of specific support programs implemented by FOSIS that have to do with entrepreneurship and employment promotion. Next slide, please. And the next, thank you. About FOSIS. FOSIS is a governmental organization. FOSIS stands for Solidarity and Social Investment Fund. We belong to the Ministry of Social Development, and we implement a series of programs that have the objective of poverty eradication or mitigation. Next slide, please. We are a decentralized organization that implements its programs through the regional office or the regional offices that are present in all of Chile's 15 regions. If we speak about regions, we mean the subnational administrative division of Chile. Just by the way, because this is a term that often emerges. The services that we deliver to our beneficiaries consist of funding of initiatives, training and education, and counseling and support. Now, depending on the specific program, it can be all of these or a combination of these elements. A couple of numbers to give you an idea about the scale of our work. Chile has a population of around 18 million, and FOSIS attends approximately 160,000–170,000 persons every year. We have an annual budget of a little over $100 million, and we employ approximately 1,300–1,400 persons nationwide. Next slide, please. So why family accompaniment? And the next. In the year 1990, when democracy was re-established in Chile after a 17 years military dictatorship, from this year onwards, poverty rates have been reduced significantly, from almost 40% in 1990 to 13% today, and extreme poverty rate also from 13% back in 1990 to 3.5% now in 2015, which are the latest numbers that we have. Nevertheless, in the late 1990s and early 2000s, the extreme poverty rate stagnated. This is what you can see on this slide in the blue circle. So there was a proportion of people living in situation of extreme poverty that maintained its numbers. The situation of these people did not improve. So the next slide, please. This situation was analyzed in order to finding answers to tackling this issue, and this is what was found. Social policies of Chile of that time, they targeted individuals or groups, but not families. There was little coordination between different state actors, and high coverage was prioritized over the comprehensiveness of interventions. Also, the provision of social welfare policies was very passive back then, in the sense that people, citizens, were expected to know about the social benefits and services on offer, and they were expected not only to know about them, but also how to access them. Next slide, please. Well, as you might imagine, this situation or these assumptions and characteristics of social policies in the early 2000s was not really suited to the country's most poorest population. Effectively, they were excluded from social government policies. So one answer to tackle this issue was the creation of a pilot program called Puente. And this slide and the next explain a little bit about the approach chosen by, or the approach on which Puente program was based. So I will ask you to skip to the next slide, and I will sum up very briefly what Puente was about. Well, first of all, it is important to mention that Puente actively encouraged the participation of the targeted families in the program. So people went, or the government went out there and invited the families to participate. The program in itself consisted of a social worker, the apoyo familiar or family counselor, a social worker which provides during a period of 24 months psychosocial support to beneficiary families in order to strengthen their capacities and resources, and also in order to connect them to the so-called opportunity structure, which means the social programs, social benefits on offer by the state. This is also where the name Puente comes from, which means bridge in Spanish. Symbolically, Puente created a bridge between the excluded families and the state. And now I would like to ask you to skip to slide number 22. The slides in between, we might use them later on. It's 3 slides, I think. Exactly this one. In 2004, Puente became the heart of what was Chile Solidario. Yeah? Chile Solidario was Chile's first social protection system, which was established by law in 2004. Just to mention 2 specific characteristics of Chile Solidario. First, it conceives poverty as a multidimensional phenomenon, demanding an intersectoral and complex response from the government. And second, instead of lifting people out of poverty through the transfer of public funds, it focused on the strengthening of the people's, of the beneficiary families' existing capacities and resources. And in this way, it distinguished itself from other social programs, social policies that were developed during this time around the world, and especially in Latin America, the so-called conditional cash transfer program. Over the years, Chile Solidario was, or the law was revised a couple of times. Today, Chile Solidario is called Seguridades y Oportunidades, and the Puente program is Programa Familias, what we are speaking about today. Next slide, please. This is what Chile's Inter-sectoral Social Protection System looks like today. There is an entrance mechanism called Social Household Registry, and there are 3 subsystems considering a person's life cycle. First, Chile Crece Contigo, which provides early childhood protection. Seguridades y Oportunidades, former Chile Solidario, where the Programa Familia is inserted. and third, the National Support and Care Subsystem, which provides protection for households with elderly or disabled family members. The next slide, please, to zoom into Seguridades y Oportunidades very briefly. It consists of 4 programs, each for a specific target group. Programa Familias for the families living in conditions of extreme poverty. And all of these 4 programs consist of 3 components. The first is psychosocial and social labor accompaniment. Second, monetary transfer. And the third, access, preferential or exclusive access to a series of social programs. And with this, I will pass on the word to Mauricio, who will speak about Familia program in its current form. Please.
Good morning for everyone. My section is about the characteristic and Familia's program. The next slide, please. The Families program is developed through coordination between the Ministry of Social Development, forces, and the municipal government. This program consists of 3 components. The accompaniment, social services and benefits, and monetary transfer. Forces, in alliance with the municipalities, governments, implements the components accompaniments. The next slide, please. The accompaniment is divided in 3 trajectories. It's Programa Eje, Paz accompaniment, psychosocial accompaniment, and social labor accompaniment. The Program Eje is implemented by the forces, and the psychosocial accompaniment and social labor accompaniment is implemented by the municipal government. The accompaniment is complemented by a family cash transfer, which is made on monthly basis and is intended to help finance the costs associated with access to services. The family program works with families in condition of social vulnerability and is implemented by the municipal government and provide psychosocial and labor support for families over a period of 44 months. The participation in the program is voluntary. The company doesn't bring direct material benefits to the family. The family accompaniment is provided by a family counselor for a period of 24 months, implementing of methodology based on weekly or bi-weekly family visits in the initial intensive phase, and afterwards during the monitoring and follow-up phase on monthly or quarterly basis. The assisted consists of information and guidance, include referrals to social services and benefits. Next slide, please. The main objective is to provide psychosocial support and empowerment for the family and development of the skills necessary to access and use the network of available services. The family and the counselor work together on a family action plan that aims to improve the quality of family life. The next slide, please. The family counselor plays a crucial role in connection the family with the local network of social services. The family that signed the required participation agreement will be visited on a regular basis by the family counselor at home or at local social services for referral. This program aims to generate certain conditions for the people in need of support and assistance so they can get real access to the valuable resources and thirdly achieve a basic level of welfare. The family program complements this beneficiary selection system with the allocation system and benefits social educational intervention and psychosocial support and provided assistance in accessing social program and state services offered by the local institutional network. Consequently, this scheme increases the possibilities of people making use of said network to ensure better levels of welfare and to enable each person to participate more autonomously in family, social, and productive life. The next slide, please. This is show them budget and coverage in 2016. The next slide, please.
If you are interested in these numbers, we can come back to these slides later. And the next.
Yeah. The next slide, please. Specifically, social labor accompaniment aims to strengthen families' capacity for income generation and employability. It's carried out in next slide, please. This is carried out in personalized work for 24 months with the members of the family who have been assigned and work on the elaboration of a work plan, its implementation of the global plan, and closing and evaluation and the finalization from the 24 months. In the next slide, please. In order to fulfill the objective, the next slide, please, of the labor plan, next slide, please. Sorry. In order to fulfill the objectives of the labor plan, there is a permanent supply of forces called entrepreneurship and employment support programs. Yo trabajo jóvenes, yo emprendo semilla y apoyo tu plan laboral. The next slide, please. Programa Yo Trabajo Jóvenes is a program supports young adults between 18 and 24 years in situation of poverty or social vulnerability to find employment. The company job training, development of the labor market access plan, and support for accessing the labor market. Next slide, please. Programa Yo Emprendo Semilla, support program that are in employment or in precarious income situation to develop a microenterprise. The company is training and technical assistance, development of a business plan and funding, and accompaniment. Next slide, please. Apoyo de plan laboral. The objective is to facilitate access to the labor market through the acquisitions of goods and all services that are needed to implement the beneficiary's work plan. The program funding training, transport, fees of certificates and other official documents, dental care, walking sticks, child care, work clothes, etc. Targeting adult beneficiaries of Seguridades y Oportunidades, of the specifically the social labor accompaniment. Next slide, please. For the challenges for this program, the next the next slide, please. In 2017, the ministry undertakes to strengthen Securities and Opportunities, or Seguridades y Oportunidades subsystem, mainly to make modifications that will contribute to reducing the inequality. It will be the only action of the state aimed exclusively at the most vulnerable population, favoring social inclusion and address social protection as a right of citizens. For this reason, the strengthening of security and opportunities centers will focus on advising democratization. The next slide, please. The democratization and tackling inequality through reduction of rights gap, strengthening individual, family, and the new level, the community capacities, and facilitating the labor insertion of people in terms of age and working condition. The next slide, please. The introduction of a well-being matrix with a right-based approach, which enables families to measure their quality of life and thus to be clear about the gaps in order to achieve this quality of life will allow through an effective articulation of supply and networking in tackling inequality. In this structure is about 5 dimensions of welfare and work and social security, health, incomes, education and home and
living environment.
Living environment, and a 6th dimension is transversal dimension, supports and social participate. Then the process of continuous improvement of the program, but assume the situation of social exclusion of the people and family who work with their impact on the degree of social cohesion that our society achieves. We accompany of the transit of family from a situation of exclusion to one inclusion. Because in the current model, the methodology consists just only a family in a context with 3 levels: the family level, individual level in accompaniment, social level accompaniment, and just only 1 session for the group level. But in the new model or the reformulation model, consider 4 levels: the individual level, family level, and the group level. In the new level is a community level. The interaction between the different systems includes the participation of institutional, public and private, and community network in the process of accompaniment, and seeks to advance in the generation of a local cultural of social protection. It generates a welfare matrix conformed by dimension based on the different areas of human development, and that involves the family situation in an integral way and addressing the intervention process from the integrality. Next slide. And thank you for everyone.
Okay, on behalf of everyone here, I would like to thank you, Claudia Mauricio, for such interesting presentation. I would like to take this opportunity to encourage our participants to start asking questions. You can write your questions in the chat bar of this platform, and then we can answer them after the intervention of Simone Ciccini, our discussant, who will provide us insights and reflections based on Fossey's presentation. So please, Simone, you can start now.
Great. Thanks a lot, Cecilia. Good day to all attendees of the webinar. Congratulations to Mauricio and Claudia for the excellent presentation, and to socialprotection.org for organizing this webinar. I think it's great to listen to those who are directly involved at the national level in the implementation of social protection policies and programs, and to share knowledge which is useful to all practitioners who are devoted to the realization of the social economic rights of the entire population, and in particular the poor and vulnerable. The idea of my brief comments is to look and discuss Chile's experience in light of concepts and models that exist in the social protection field, and also to examine this experience in the broader Latin American and Caribbean context. As we heard from Mauricio and Claudio, the Familias program is part of a subsystem called Opportunities and Security, which in turn is part of a system called Inter-sectoral Social Protection. So one point from the conceptual point of view is to make clear that although this system is called as the broad name of social protection, it is actually about non-contributory, what we call non-contributory social protection, or social assistance, right? Because it does not include the pillars of social security or contributory social protection, and what here at ECLA consider also a third pillar, labor market regulation. What I really think, however, needs to be highlighted is the fact that in Chile they do have a system, right? A social assistance system, not just a collection of programs. And also it's very interesting to know that this system includes also an innovative issue such as the provision of care for instance, for the elderly, which is recognized increasingly as important to improve people's welfare. One of the trademarks of Chilean social policy is, and social assistance policies in particular, is comprehensiveness, and also having adopted a rights-based approach and the life cycle approach. We need to respond to the plea of the poor and vulnerable who urgently need access to services, jobs, social transfers to support their livelihood. So we always need to implement policies and programs, but if we do not have a well thought and coordinated system that supports those policies and programs, we will not be very effective, probably will have duplication, and we would lose the multidimensional view of poverty and vulnerability and social exclusion that instead is present in the Chilean case. Some points I would like to highlight of Chile Security and Opportunity subsystem and trademarks of this system are, one, the fact that there is a strong emphasis on connecting people, especially people living in extreme poverty, to the existing network of social services, the implementation of these family support and having family support counselors, on which Mauricio delved in his presentation, and the active search of those in need. These are long-standing characteristics in Chile, as Claudio explained. First, there was the Puente program, and then Chile Solidario, and those programs began more than a decade ago, right? It is really important to say that although there was a change in government, and thus these programs were somewhat changed and modified, they are sustained by law. There was a Chile Solidario law, and there is a Securities and Opportunities law. So this is something that has been discussed broadly in the national level. And also there is although with changes, there is a certain continuity. It's not like Chile, even if there was a change in government throughout all the good things done. So the important message of trying to build up on what learned and not trying to reinvent the wheel. Now, at the regional level, obviously, some aspects are common in other countries. The active search of the excluded population was present in the Brazil Sem Miseria strategy, and countries like Colombia with the Red Unidos, or Costa Rica with the Puente, actually called Puente program, have been inspired by Chile's experience. Generally, the family support counselors and this idea of connecting people to the existing network of social services happens in countries where those social services are present and are strong, although there has been also a pilot in Haiti trying to connect poor people to, for instance, services offered by NGOs. Now, if I have to make a slight, probably personal criticism, is that very often Chilean social assistance has focused on the extreme poor, although now the vision is broader, social exclusion. It includes people, for instance, the homeless and people that have a problem with justice. Still, for a country which is one of the, income per capita terms, one of the richest in the region, probably we could have a broader vision of inclusion, of including also the non-indigent poor. There are some measures, some programs that are actually have that vision of covering also not just extremely poor, but in general, if we look at the monetary transfers, they are more geared to the extremely poor. Now, the focus of the webinar is on family support counselors. So when we zoom in the Familia's program, we really see a great example of comprehensiveness in social policy. This comprehensiveness is not achieved just by coordinating different sectors like Ministry of Labor, Ministry of Education, Health, Social Development at the national level, but actually to bring comprehensiveness in the territories and at the individual, family and community level. And this comprehensiveness relates both to the understanding of poverty and vulnerability, which is, as we all know, multidimensional phenomenon, but also to the institutional coordination required to tackle it. As Mauricio mentioned, there is work done with the municipalities, right? This is the clear complexity of social policy related compared to economic policy. In economic policy, at the central bank, we modify the interest rate, and then all of the economic system will react to that. In social policy, we can decide things at the central level, but we have what we could call a last mile problem. We need to get to people. So family support counselors actually are an excellent way to connect to families, to strengthen the link also between state institution and families. Very often, this is the face of the state for poor families. And also, it's a great opportunity to get information from the bottom up and learn from the field what is going on, what are the problems, are our policies good or they are not working so well. One issue is the 24 months that was mentioned here. We all know that family support not necessarily can solve the problems in 2 years, so probably there is a need to sometimes reincorporate families. This is an issue I would like probably to hear more from colleagues at FOSIS. But from the United Nations perspective, leaving no one behind, definitely family support is something useful. And from the studies conducted so far, we have evidence that the families receiving these supports, the social workers really appreciate it. They obviously appreciate, say, monetary transfers, but having somebody that helps them connect to social services, help them connect to the labor market is something very important. And this leads me to discuss what is the great news, because as we said, Puente and Chile Solidario were already doing some of these things, but now we have this labor and productive inclusion pillar that, as Cecilia said, is something common at the international level as well. Here at ECLAC, we devoted a chapter of the 2015 Social Panorama of Latin America on the issue, and indeed it's a common thread in Latin America and the Caribbean. We have had monetary transfers, conditional cash transfers, where the idea was to tackle an immediate short-term problem, increasing consumption of families via monetary transfers, and the long-term problem, the strengthening health and education of children. But the middle term, the labor and productive inclusion of families and the adults in those families was not tackled. So now, after a decade and a half of experience with monetary transfers, we have great emphasis on laboring inclusive production programs. The evidence in terms of evaluations is more mixed than cash transfers, but it's really important when we have a broad spectrum of programs like those mentioned by Mauricio and Claudia in their presentation, not focusing, say, only on entrepreneurship, but also in strengthening capacities of youth to find employment. So just a last message. The last message I give is on the need of comprehensiveness, a comprehensive view where we have transfers, access to social services, labor and productive inclusion supported by family support. And this is a big dilemma and the big challenge for social assistance currently in Chile, Latin America, and probably in the world, to have a comprehensive and coordinated view. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Simone. I would like to express our appreciation of your great intervention. Now, I am sure that after that stimulating presentation followed by Simone's brilliant reflections and inputs, our participants would like to ask some questions or comments on the Chile's Inter-sectoral Social Protection System and its Familia program. So, dear participants, we invite you to ask your questions in the chat. We will address the questions to the FOSIS experts. They will be answering the questions either in Spanish or English. And if it will be in Spanish, Claudio and I will give you a brief translation. We will appreciate if your questions will be very clear and comprehensive. Just to start, we have a first question. This question is from Vinicius Ferreira, and the question is, what is the basic measure of the unique registry, families or individuals? And we're also going to ask a second question to have like more time for our experts to answer these both questions. And the other question is from my colleague Nikos Nikolidakis. And Nikos' question is, Nikos says that FOSIS presentation presented an analysis on the situation of the 90s, including the lack of complementarity of programs, as well as the high breadth, low depth situation, both similar to today's situations in many Southeast Asian countries, including Vietnam and others. And Nikos' question is, if did the presented programs actually achieve to overcome those challenges, and what are the current challenges that have not been met through the programs in Chile? I'm going to help our experts in FOSIS, and I'm going to translate these questions in Spanish. La primera pregunta es, ¿cuál es la medida base del registro único? Si la unidad es familias o si se mide en individuos. Y la segunda pregunta tiene que ver con el análisis que se hizo al inicio de la presentación sobre la situación de los 90 y la falta de complementariedad de algunos programas que se enfatizan en llegar a muchas personas, pero con poca profundidad, y que esta situación se repite en algunos países del sudeste asiático, incluyendo Vietnam. Entonces la pregunta es si algunos programas están realmente superando este reto y si hay algunos retos que todavía no han sido alcanzados por los programas. Now I'm going to give the floor to FOSIS to answer these questions.
Okay, thank you very much for these questions. Let me just briefly tell you that, as you might have seen, Mauricio and me, we are joined by two colleagues, Gerda Evansberger de los programas específicos de apoyo para la empleabilidad y el emprendimiento, y también José Cisterna, que actualmente es... cambié al español. I changed to Spanish without noticing, sorry. José Cisternas is the head of Familia program today. He has a very long experience in this field because he actually participated in the creation of Programa Puente roughly 15 years ago. So I think both of these questions can be answered by him. We already tried to translate them. I hope everything, all the information reached him. So he will give the answer and we will translate back to English.
Ya, vamos a responder esta primero.
Okay. So please, could you switch to slide at the beginning, slide number 15, please.
Entonces, tú vas contando. Yo creo que sí, vamos a ir conversando. A ver, yo creo que en estos años, ¿cierto? Cuando se mida esta evaluación, ¿ya? Lo que se logra, o sea, lo que se detecta en el fondo es que en esos años, ¿cierto? La pobreza no baja, la extrema pobreza no bajaba, ¿ya? Y la pobreza bajaba muy poco. ¿Ah? Entonces, lo que se hace ahí, o el supuesto que está detrás, ¿cierto? Que estas familias en exclusión social no lo estaban haciendo los beneficios. Yo creo que eso tú lo dijiste, ¿cierto? Por lo tanto, cuando se tiene esta constatación, lo que se define, ¿cierto? Es un programa que efectivamente acerque la demanda de las familias a la oferta, porque estaban en exclusión social y no estaban recibiendo los beneficios. ¿Ya?
So that's basically what I already explained in the initial presentation. I will just briefly sum it up again. When these measures, this data was taken, poverty was reduced. Well, like the reduction process slowed a little bit, but especially the extreme poverty rates, they basically stagnated. So the challenge was to put it in a few words, to connect the state's provision of social policy with the families, with the demand, offer and demand, bring them together. How do we do this?
La otra evaluación o análisis es que en esa fecha no se intervenía en familias y se define la familia como el grupo que espontáneamente o naturalmente se cuida a sí mismo y en forma sostenible en el tiempo.
Okay. The family wasn't considered by social policies back then as a unit of intervention. This was a mistake, we believe, because the family is like the natural unit which has strong connections between its members, and basically these members support each other. So what was the assumption that was made is that we have to focus on the family, because that's where social policy, social intervention programs can be most effective.
Por lo tanto, la estrategia de intervención define, ¿cierto?, trabajar en la familia, porque es este grupo, y además define que hay que acercar la oferta, ¿no? Y por lo tanto, que se produzca una intersección entre la familia y la oferta. Y es ahí donde aparece la figura del apoyo familiar, haciendo un acompañamiento familiar para que ayude a organizar los recursos, ¿cierto? Y además se coordine este otro componente de modo que la oferta, ¿cierto?, se ponga a disposición en las familias. Entonces se intervienen en los dos componentes, generando una oferta, ¿cierto?, articulada, disponible, pertinente, ¿cierto?, a las demandas de las familias, y se potencian los recursos de las familias, ayudando a organizar los recursos que tienen y se produzca esta intersección. Yeah.
So the assumption was based on two levels of analysis. First, we have to focus on these families. Second, we need to connect them to the social policies. the person of the family support counselor was the answer, the solution. At the same time, this person, the social worker, organizes the social benefits on offer and works directly with the families in order to help them to develop their capacities. So that's maybe from here on, the question is if this hypothesis and the answer that we invented to respond to this situation was effective, right? That's the question. Entonces la pregunta es si
Ahora bien,
basado en esa hipótesis.
claro. Ahora hay una evaluación del Banco Mundial del 2008, ¿cierto?, que evalúa esto, ¿no?, y que dice que la reducción de la pobreza entre el 2002 y el 2008, porque la pregunta tenía que ver con esta, que es el único estudio de evaluación de impacto que tenemos, habla de que la reducción de la pobreza, el 18% de la reducción de la pobreza se deben a este sistema de protección social. La evaluación del Banco Mundial.
So, actually the World Bank in 2008 did an impact of evaluation of Programa Puente, and what it found is that between 2002 and 2008, 18% of the reduction that was reached or was reached during this period, 18% was exclusively due to this program.
Aumentan las coberturas de salud, como controles de niños sanos, vacunas, aumentan los porcentajes de educación, como alfabetización, disminución de la deserción escolar, estoy hablando de las dimensiones, y también en el área laboral, ¿cierto?, aumenta la demanda de la familia respecto a programas de la oferta que tienen como objetivo potenciar las capacidades, como los programas, ¿cierto?, que mencionaba Mauricio, el Yo Semilla, el Yo Trabajo Joven.
Okay, so the evaluation showed that during this period, the coverages of different services, for example, in the area of healthcare or education, increased for this specific population. On the other hand, in the work or employment area, the demand that was coming from these families, from the targeted families or the beneficiary families, towards social programs that aimed at social productive inclusion also augmented. The demand was raised from them. So these are clear indicators that the assumptions were right and that the program made a certain impact to correct this situation, this initial problem situation that we faced.
Por lo tanto, el supuesto de que no estaban en inclusión social o no estaban demandando, hoy día, ¿cierto?, estaría efectivamente trabajado o impactado, ¿cierto?, con el programa. Y lo otro es que el tema de reducción de la pobreza, que si bien tiene que ver con crecimiento económico, en este momento estamos con un crecimiento bajo, igual hoy día estamos en ¿cuánto? ¿Un 3% del tema pobreza? ¿Y un 13% de pobreza extrema? O sea, perdón, de pobreza. O sea, a pesar del no crecimiento económico, que es el que explica más ¿cierto?, la baja, aún seguimos sosteniendo un porcentaje inferior, ¿cierto?, a los que iniciales.
So we can basically say two things. First, that we moved from a situation of exclusion to inclusion is confirmed based on what we spoke about before. And second, during most of these last 2 decades, in Chile we had a very strong economic growth. Nevertheless, in the last few years, this growth was slowed significantly. Today there is very little growth in Chile, but nevertheless the numbers show that extreme poverty and poverty in general keeps on declining. So this is also a signal that if it's not the economic growth as such that lifts people out of poverty, it very probably are the state policies directed at these segments of the population.
Complementarily, the multidimensional
Yes, we might show you another slide, 21, please. ¿Esta o la anterior?
Anterior.
The last one, sorry. The one before this. 20.
Yeah.
Slide number 20, please. This one, yes.
Yeah, Chile's grown considerability and achieved reduced poverty by 15 points in the last 10 years. Yes, the PPP is approximately $21,000, and the life expectancy is similar than to Germany and England, but the main challenge that was most tackled in the inequality, because Chile is the most inequality country in the OECD. What is in mind in the social protection system is very necessary. The Chilean, what is the slide in the model of the social protection system?
23.
Can you slide 23, please? The Inter-sectoral Social Protection System, like said Simone, consider the life cycle of a person. First, the Chile Crece Contigo, which provides universal coverage and the delivery of benefits and preschool education and health for the child and the mother. And the Securities or Seguridades y Oportunidades subsystem, which provided assistance to priority groups and family. The unit intervention in the families program is the family, not the person. It's not individual, it's the family. And another free program is Vínculos. Sorry. Okay. Don't read. I can't read. Sorry.
Abriendo camino.
Abriendo camino. And the third program is National Support and Care Subsystem for the people and long-run care heads. This is 3 programs come from the pillar or solidarity pillar subsystem. It's the grant basic solidarity pension and disability benefits to elderly people who may not be able to contribute.
Okay. Hubo otra pregunta there was another question asking for the basic unit of measurement, right?
Yeah.
Whether it was the family or the individual.
Pepe, sí. Desde este mismo supuesto inicial, ¿cierto? Nuestro foco de intervención siempre ha sido la familia.
Yeah. So based on the same assumption that we stated in the beginning, the focus has always been the family and not the individual.
Para producir esta intersección entre la oferta de la estructura de oportunidades y los recursos de la familia. ¿Sí? Por lo tanto, en todos los años siempre ha sido el mismo supuesto y el mismo grupo de intervención que es la familia, independiente que dentro de la familia también trabajemos con algunos integrantes específicos, ¿cierto? Por ejemplo, las personas con capacidad generadora de ingresos que requieren una vinculación más específica o especial en el área sociolaboral.
Okay. So the focus has always been to connect the opportunity structure with the resources of the family. So the basic unit is the family. Nevertheless, in the work sessions that are being carried out during these 24 months, there are situations where work is done specifically with individual members of the family, but this depends on an assessment and on the family action plan that is developed specifically for each family.
¿Y cómo se eligen? Pasamos inmediatamente.
Another question was how families are chosen, right?
El Ministerio de Desarrollo Social, a través de un instrumento de medición, define algunas variables, entre ellos ingresos, pero también vulnerabilidades, ¿ya? Como personas con discapacidad, adultos mayores, personas o familias con niños pequeños, y por lo tanto hace un algoritmo o una síntesis de componentes no solamente de ingresos, sino de otras vulnerabilidades, y organiza una nómina de familias, ¿ya? Que corresponden al 10% más vulnerable. El primer grupo es un grupo extremadamente pobre de ingresos, ¿ya? Pero con esta composición de vulnerabilidad también.
Okay, so the selection of the families is being done by the Ministry of Social Development, the institution that FOSIS depends on. They basically measure income poverty combined with other measurements of other vulnerabilities. Yeah? There might be the presence of disabled people or disabled family members or elderly family members or small children. Also, for example, the place that they live, whether it's very far off from social infrastructure. Single mothers also is a factor that adds to the vulnerability of the family. And based on all of these components, an algorithm is created through an IT system, and afterwards, through this algorithm, the ministry creates a list of families that are being singled out for intervention. So this is how these lists are created.
El Ministerio anualmente nos da una cobertura nacional y la distribuimos en todas las comunas del país, de acuerdo a estas variables, ¿ya? Y las municipalidades deben intervenir solo a estas familias en orden de prelación entregada. 1, 2, 3, 4. De acuerdo a esta cobertura.
So as FOSIS Familia program, we receive on the one hand from the ministry every year we receive a number of coverage that we have at our disposal. On the other hand, we receive a list of targeted families, and then we pass on these lists to the municipalities, and the municipality, depending on the coverage that they get assigned, they go and invite the families regarding the order of vulnerability of each of the families. So they start with the most vulnerable one and see until where they get. Yeah. So it's not universal coverage. This list this priority list that the ministry generates, we are not in conditions to cover them all, but we have to make certain selection process there, and this is according to the degree of vulnerability of each family.
Y a diferencia de otros programas de la región, como nombraba Simone, el eje de este programa es el acompañamiento. A diferencia, ¿cierto?, de que en otros países son las transferencias condicionadas. Si bien nosotros tenemos transferencia, el eje es el acompañamiento. ¿Sí? No el programa eje, el eje.
Okay. As Simone mentioned before in his comment, there are other programs in the Latin American region with that work specifically with this target group. But what is different about the Chilean experience is that the axis, like the basic element of our strategy, is the accompaniment. There are monetary transfers, but they are secondary. They come to complement the accompaniment component. They are not at the center of the system.
Y las transferencias brindan seguridades mientras se fortalecen las capacidades y las vinculaciones de las familias con la estructura de oportunidades.
Okay, so while we work with the accompaniment in the activation and development of the family resources, the monetary transfers, what they do is assure that the family can stay in this process. So there are certain transfers that are being made, or services or goods that are being acquired for the family in order for them to stay in this process, not to drop out. Like fulfill the minimum conditions so that the family can keep on developing in this process.
Y hay otra pregunta con respecto a que el proceso de acompañamiento, ¿cuál es?
Okay.
¿Sí?
There was another question about the accompaniment process. Yeah? What it consists of, basically.
Se trabaja sobre los recursos de la familia, las potencialidades de la familia como principio.
Okay, so we have a slide there that we maybe can show in order to make this a little bit more clear. That's in the annex. I'm just looking for it.
No, the next. The previous slide.
Para apoyar. 54. 54, please.
Danke. Danke.
Confusión completa.
Okay. Hay una, lo que te decía, se trabaja con las familias generando una serie de procesos. ¿Ya? Primero, viendo las potencialidades de la familia, identificando cuáles son sus preocupaciones o metas o aspiraciones. ¿Ya? Por lo tanto, se definen metas y se priorizan metas. ¿Ya? Y por lo tanto se construye un plan. Okay. Se construye un plan que tiene metas y esas metas se definen cuáles son las acciones o recursos que tú necesitas para cumplir esas metas. ¿Ya? Y se definen ciertos responsables para trabajar esas acciones que tú necesitas o recursos que tú necesitas, los que no tienes, fortalecer los que tienes, ¿ya? Y se van fijando compromisos de acción, ¿ya? Con fechas determinadas para alcanzar esas acciones y recursos para alcanzar las metas que tiene la familia.
Okay, so in a nutshell, different processes are being worked on with the family. Yeah. In essence, there are potentials of the family that are being identified and certain goals that the family itself proposes. Yeah. So we define these potentials, we define these goals, then we prioritize them, we define persons within the family responsible for each of them. We define actions that lead to reaching them, and resources that need to be developed or activated in order to be able to reach those goals. And this is being transformed into a family action plan. Yeah? And the fulfillment of the plan, in theory, leads to the development of the family, or to accomplishing their goals.
Just only say the transversal skills for all the process is the conversation. It's not a questionnaire. Yes, it's for the conversation. The family defines all the strategy, the assessment, the visions, and for the conversation, the family moves and fulfill their commitments.
Falta una respuesta.
Yeah.
Por lo tanto, cada familia tiene un plan distinto. Se acompaña un plan particular de cada familia, que podría estar en las áreas de educación, salud, trabajo, ingreso. ¿Todas esas dimensiones? Sí. ¿Una combinación de? Es una combinación, sí, generalmente es una combinación.
So what is important to mention, based on what we were just explaining, each family plan is singular, it's individual. There is no recipe that works for every family, but for each family a new plan, a new process is being designed based on what Mauricio mentioned, conversation. So there is a certain methodology that guides this process, but the outcome is completely open.
No sé si lo dijeron, que lo importante de este proceso es que la familia se sienta comprometida con el proceso y con sus acciones, que es distinto a un condicionamiento clásico, ¿no? Que en donde tú le dices lo que tiene que hacer, que esa es la esencia del acompañamiento. Así que venga de la familia, ¿cierto? Para que cuando termine el programa, la familia siga con capacidades propias, autónomas, ¿cierto? De seguir mejorando su bienestar y su calidad de vida.
What Jose is saying is that a very important aspect of family accompaniment in general is pointing at the autonomy or the sustainability of this process. So one thing that we try to generate is that the family takes ownership of the process. They have to make themselves responsible for reaching those goals. So this is also in contrast with maybe more traditional approaches to social protection programs that are more paternalistic. Here we appear as a partner, as an institution or a social worker who accompanies the family, providing them support, but not telling them how to do things. That's very important.
Si al final de los 24 meses, toda la familia tiene 24 meses de intervención.
We were just answering a last question about the what happens if after the 24 months the results are not achieved.
Yes, sorry to interrupt, Claudio. I just would like to ask if Simone wants to comment about the questions in the last discussion.
Okay, thank you, Cecilia. Well, actually, first of all, thanks. We're gonna reply to a question which I made. I'm looking forward to it. Just I wanted to make a comment on a question that was raised. You know, what has been the result of this comprehensive approach, right? And I think it's always important to remember here we're talking about social assistance policy, social policy, and in Chile is a great example of comprehensiveness. It doesn't mean obviously that we have solved all the issues, because there is a great more macro issue of coordinating with economic policies and environmental policies, which are designed at the national level, and to face the big inequality problem that the country faces and all Latin America and the Caribbean faces. What do I mean? I mean that, for instance, the Familia program connects people to the existing network of social services, connects to jobs, right? And thus we obviously need that the economy grows and creates those jobs, and also we need, for instance, say that people can access decent pensions, right? So right now, say in Chile, there is a huge debate on pensions. We have a solidarity pillar, but still it's not enough to protect people in old age. So we always need the collaboration of the comprehensiveness, not only, which is already difficult to do at the social assistance level, but also with broader policies. In Chile there have been several disasters, be it earthquakes, flooding, fires, and the Social Development Ministry has a role, but obviously there needs to be a broad view at the governmental level that this right-based approach, which is so well placed in a program like Familia, actually goes and influences also, say, economic policy for it to be more pro-equality and go against the inequalities that exist. That was my comments. Thanks, Cecilia, and I'm looking forward to hear the issue of the 24 months.
Okay, thank you very much, Simone. I just would like to mention the following questions. One is from Simone. What happens if after 24 months families don't achieve the expected results? Can they re-enter to the program, or if not, how do they can get support? En español es, si a los 24 meses las familias no alcanzan los resultados esperados, si pueden reingresar al programa, y si no, ¿cómo se les apoya? And also we have another question from Maria Jose Chamorro, and she asks if given that that care is one of the main obstacles for poor women to enter the labor market, how do the provision of care services for dependents fit into the broader strategy? Maria Jose refers not only childcare, but care of the elderly, the sick people, and she's asking these questions from a gender perspective approach. En español es cómo encaja la provisión de servicios de atención para los dependientes en la estrategia más amplia, ¿no? Dependientes hablando de niños, de enfermos y de ancianos. Y bueno, la pregunta viene desde una perspectiva de enfoque de género. And just I would like to add one point, please. We are running out of time. Let's try to focus on the questions and try to answer as brief as possible.
We have doubts about the second question, but we will answer the first one. And by the way, we are all very much in agreement with Simone's comment about the greater macro challenges that Chile faces. So we speak about Ministry of Social Development and forces here, but obviously in order to sort out all the problems of the country, the response has to be much more on a macro level, connecting different strategies, etc. So thank you very much, Simone, for this comment. So the question about what happens after the 24 months.
La familia a los 24 meses egresa, ¿cierto? Y tiene 12 meses más donde sigue conectado, donde sigue siendo oferta preferente o acceso preferente a la oferta, al otro componente. Yeah?
So after the 24 months, the family concludes its participation in family program, which, if you remember, consists of 3 components: the accompaniment, monetary transfers, and the access to preferential access to other social programs. Accompaniment and monetary transfers are over after 24 months, but the preferential access keeps on for 12 more months. So this is one part of the answer.
Y al cabo de ese tiempo, en la nómina del año siguiente, si una familia que estuvo vuelve a aparecer en nómina, porque reúne los requisitos de extrema pobreza y vulnerabilidad, va a volver a aparecer, no se le castiga por haber participado.
Okay.
Siempre y cuando cumpla los requisitos de elegibilidad.
Okay. So the process that is being done by the Ministry of Social Development of identifying the families in need of this assistance, this is being done annually. And it is perfectly possible for a family to reappear in next year's list. They are not being excluded for having participated. So if they reappear, they can re-enter the program.
No se amplía la intervención, pero puede ser sujeto posterior, ¿cierto?, de seguir incorporado, no, de incorporación nuevamente.
So the process ends after 24 months, but it can reinitiate the next year.
¿Y cuál era la otra pregunta? No la entendí.
And the second question was about the care services, right? As the main obstacle for the inclusion, the development of women specifically. That was the question, right? How this is inserted in the system, or how this issue is being tackled? Can you just confirm that we understood right?
Yes, it's about the support of the care, the dependents, which sometimes are an obstacle for women to get to look for a job or to get a job.
¿Cierto? Dado la composición de la selección, la mayoría de nuestros grupos son reportajes jefaturas femeninas.
FOSIS is preparing their answer, and I just would like to tell our participants, if there is not enough time to answer all the questions, we're going to answer after the webinar, and we are going to share it and post it in the socialprotection.org platform. But I think now FOSIS is ready to answer.
You're ready. Sorry, we were just discussing how to answer this question. Well, first, it has to be said that the majority of our targeted population are women. Yeah, most households or families that are being attended by Programa Familia are single mother households. Because of many of them are very, very vulnerable, and that's why they get into the list of targeted families. So what we try to do during the intervention of Programa Familia is, on the one hand, effectively, as you I think implied, trying to provide the conditions so that the mother can, or the woman can participate in the activities that are being implemented in the context of the program. So these conditions are facilitated, for example, through childcare provision, etc. But on the other hand, we also try to counteract this tendency of having only women participating, because often the male members of the family tend to stay out of the process. They tend to not making themselves responsible for the development of their families. So we also try to encourage their participation. So this, like two dimensions of the same, or the two faces of the same coin. That on the one hand, we effectively try to facilitate for the conditions for the woman to participate, and on the other hand, we try to foment the participation of the male members also. And as Gerda mentioned, many women that participate in Programa Familia, Seguridades y Oportunidades, in the specific development plan, in the labor dimension, they opt for a strategy that aims at self-employment, like setting up a micro-entrepreneurship. This could be cutting hair, making bread, stuff like that. So I think what has to be rescued here is that the program is very flexible and basically can react to these situations, but and the gender issue is being treated generally, transversally. It's not located in individual actions. I hope this answers more or less your question. Are you still there? Cecilia, are there more questions?
Okay, thank you very much. We have 2 more questions. And one question is from Yuko Okamura. And the question is, what are the identification criteria to be eligible for social labor accompaniment? And if it is similar to proximity tests for targeting. En español es, ¿cuáles son los criterios de identificación para el acompañamiento sociolaboral? Y si hay una prueba como de recursos disponibles para la focalización. And we have another question, which is from Vinicius Ferreira, and the question is, how do you measure the access to social policies by the targeted group? En español sería, ¿cómo se mide el acceso a las políticas sociales por parte del grupo objetivo?
Could you just repeat the last question, Cecilia? Excuse me.
Yes, of course. The question is, how do you measure the access to social policies by the targeted group? O mi traducción es, ¿cómo se mide el acceso a las políticas sociales por parte del grupo objetivo?
Okay, let's start with the accompaniment, the eligibility criteria. That I think was the first question.
La primera es, bueno, dentro de cada hogar, ¿cierto? El apoyo familiar o laboral, pero en familiar lo que hace es, junto con la familia, seleccionar, elegir a una persona con capacidad generadora de ingresos dentro de las personas que tienen capacidad generadora de ingresos, elegir cuál de ellos, ¿cierto? Va a participar. Podría ser 1 o 2, hoy día hasta 3, ¿no? 2, 1 o 2 participantes por familia, pero es la familia quien lo elige, ¿ya? Con el acompañamiento, ¿cierto?, de reflexión, de conversación, del apoyo familiar. Una vez que es elegido, o son elegidos por familia, ¿cierto?, pasan a participar y a ser acompañados por el apoyo laboral, que es otro profesional.
Okay. So the selection of
con capacidad generadora de ingresos.
Okay. The criteria are family members of a family that participates in Seguridades y Oportunidades, 18 years or more, and they must have the potential to generate income. Yeah. And this selection is being done by the family itself with the accompaniment of the family support counselor. So the family decides which of its members are in condition of generating income. and this can be up to 2 persons, 1 or 2 persons within the family, and once defined, they are being passed over to the social labor accompaniment component. That's how the selection is being done.
Y la otra pregunta, no sé si lo que entiendo es cómo acceden todas las personas a las políticas sociales.
No, cómo se evalúa.
No, esa fue la última.
Esa es esa. Es que no hay otra antes. No, sí es esa. Pero no la entiendo. No. ¿A qué se refiere? Porque
no, yo creo que, como hablamos al inicio, de...
How do you measure the access to social policies by the target group?
es ordenante, porque tiene que ver con todo tiene que ver con la ficha. Hasta el año pasado era la ficha de protección social. Hoy día, ¿cierto?, es el registro social de hogares, que es una ficha única. Lo que pasa es que no todos los países tienen fichas únicas, entonces es una ficha única que mide, ¿cierto?, las condiciones de vulnerabilidad y extrema pobreza de todas las familias que demandan al Estado, que demandan a los municipios. De esa configuración, ¿cierto?, el Ministerio de Desarrollo Social, ¿cierto?, ordena a las familias para cada programa. A nosotros nos define, como tú lo dijiste antes, con familias que se considera variable de ingresos, más vulnerabilidades, pero si hay otro programa, ¿cierto?, también define, cada programa define define, ¿cierto?, cuáles son los algoritmos, pero en base a esa ficha la mayoría. Los programas funcionan en base a esa ficha existente.
So there is a basic mechanism that the social household registry that we mentioned at some point during the presentation, which basically recollects data from every person that lives in Chile. And based on this information, it is established what degree of vulnerability the person has. So this is how the intervention are being targeted. But we are not really sure if we understand right the question. I can imagine that you, the person who asked the question, refers to what we spoke about in the beginning, that there were certain sectors of society that were excluded from social policies in general.
Ahora, hay una serie de programas y servicios que son específicos para esta familia, participan en el sistema de protección social, algunos financiados por ley de presupuesto de la nación, y otros a través de convenios con el ministerio. El ministerio le transfiere recursos y firma convenios con los servicios para intervenir sobre estas familias, desde el componente oferta, desde el componente prestación y servicio social. No sé cómo le llamaron ahí en la presentación.
But no, maybe you can clarify. What's the question? We don't understand it. Sorry.
Maybe because we are running out of time, we can clarify the question later and we can answer by email, and also we are going to post this answer in the platform. I would like to ask Simone and if he wants to complement any answer or if he wants to comment, give another comment. Simone?
Sure. Just to mention one of the points that actually was also raised by a question, the issue of care. In Chile, in the Latin American context, is one of the countries where female labor participation is lower, right? We just came out last week with a new study on labor participation in Chile, and it confirms that. So one key, and also many of the families attended by the Familias program are headed by women. There is an issue with the, let's say, single family headed by just a woman without the husband or the partner. So it is really key that the state continues to strengthen its care services, not only to help children and the elderly and people with disabilities and the sick, but also as a tool to improve the labor participation, especially of women that are in poor and vulnerable conditions, that often they prefer to be self-employed just because they have more flexibility to adapt to the needs of their families, but probably in a formal employment they would actually do better in economic terms. So the issue of care is really key. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Simone. I don't know if Fosis wants to say some final words.
Yes, well, thank all of you. It was a real pleasure for us to be able to share our work with such an ample, diverse, distinguished audience. It's not every day that that this happens. So thank you very much. We hope it was interesting for you, that you learned something. If there are open questions, you always can contact us. I think through through Cecilia or February, the people from SPEC or GIZ, you are welcome to ask any question that you have that has not been answered, or also to take contact and speak about other issues. We are very happy to be able to create networks and share experience. We're also very interested in learning about the experiences of other countries. So it was a real pleasure. Thank you very much. And I would also like to thank my colleagues who really made possible this presentation, because I am the messenger, but the real experts are them. So thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much. I would like to thank again our speakers, Mauricio and Claudio, also all the expert team of FOSIS. I will also thank you, our discussant, for his very interesting and stimulating contributions. Also to our participants, thank you for your attention and the valuable following discussion. The Social Protection for Employment Community SPEC will organize more webinars on country experiences on linking social protection to sustainable employment. We have planned 2 other webinars to present this year for Mexico and Peru. Please keep an eye on the notifications from socialprotection.org. You may also access materials on this topic, but you can also participate in other activities that are facilitated by the community. Thanks to FOSIS, the Social Protection for Employment Community, and finally the socialprotection.org team in Brazil for making this webinar happen. I look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you very much.